The late summer heat of Arizona shimmered across the cracked pavement outside Riker's auto garage. The clang of wrenches echoed from the open bay doors, mixing with the hum of cicadas. Inside, 17-year-old Riley Riker knelt beside a stripped-down V8, her hands stained with grease and determination. While most girls her age scrolled through phones, Riley could dismantle and rebuild carburetors in her sleep. Her father, Joe Riker, a respected mechanic known for fixing what others gave up on, had taught her everything. Riley wasn't just good, she was exceptional, but no one outside the town had ever seen it, not yet. The garage door rolled open with a screech. A glossy black truck, coated in desert dust but clearly custom-built, crawled into the shop. The rumble of its engine was uneven misfiring, spitting on the verge of stalling. Out stepped a tall man in a tailored suit, sunglasses hiding his expression, but the air of superiority needed no translation. Bryce Camden, CEO of Camden Motors and millionaire, auto magnate, had arrived. Wordlessly, he surveyed the garage and narrowed his eyes when he spotted Riley bent over an engine. With a smirk, he turned to Joe. "So, this is the famous Riker's garage." Joe wiped his hands on a rag. "That's us. You've got trouble?" Bryce motioned to the truck and said, "Custom prototype. My engineers in California spent weeks tuning it. Broke down 10 miles outside town. Closest help was here." Joe nodded and approached the vehicle. Bryce, glancing toward Riley, added casually, "Why don't we have your daughter take a crack at it? I like seeing ambition fail up close." Joe bristled, but before he could speak, Riley stepped forward, eyes calm, voice steady. "I'll take a look," she said. Bryce raised an eyebrow. "You sure, kid?" Riley ignored the sarcasm and walked to the front of the truck. Bryce chuckled and added, "Tell you what, if you mess it up, more than it already is, you owe me a new engine. Fair?" Joe's jaw tightened. "That's not," Riley cut in. "Fair enough." She popped the hood, her heart pounding but her hands steady. The engine was beautiful, but flawed, too many custom parts crammed into a layout that defied airflow. Logic? As the crowd of garage regulars and Bryce's assistants gathered, Riley leaned over the engine, her mind already at work, decoding what had gone wrong. She carefully removed the protective housing and scanned the internals. The intake manifold was mistimed, fuel injectors out of sync, and there was a strange clicking noise from somewhere deep in the chamber. The entire layout was precision-machined, yet flawed in its integration. No wonder the factory team couldn't fix it. It was over-designed and underthought. Riley reached for her socket wrench and began loosening bolts. Joe watched silently from the side, pride and worry competing in his eyes. Bryce leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching like it was entertainment. "Hope, you know what you're doing, princess," he muttered. She didn't answer. Within minutes she had half the engine dissected and laid out like a surgeon's tools. Bryce's smirk faded as her pace remained swift but careful. Eyes scanning, hands methodical. She rebuilt the ignition sequencing, realigned the sensors, and stripped out a faulty airflow sensor she suspected was interfering with the ECU's mapping. Her movements drew murmurs from the staff. This wasn't guesswork. This was precision. She paused once, pulling her notebook from her back pocket and flipping to a page filled with her handwritten theories about sensor flow in high-compression builds. She made one change and nodded. "Try it now," she said. Joe hesitated. Bryce shrugged. "Fine." He climbed in, turned the key, and the truck sputtered, then roared to life, smoother than it ever had. The idle was even. The engine purred like a lion instead of coughing like a mule. Bryce revved it once, then again, then stepped out slowly, staring at Riley like she'd just rewritten physics. "What did you do?" he asked. Riley pointed to the sensor module. "It was misrouted. Your airflow diagnostics. We're canceling out timing calibrations. I built a bypass and corrected the delay loop manually." Bryce blinked. Joe smiled faintly. The garage erupted in applause. Regulars clapped Riley on the back. One older mechanic whistled low and said, "She just outdid every engineer on your payroll, Camden." Bryce said nothing at first, then slowly took off his sunglasses. "You're 17? Riley nodded. "And you figured that out in 40 minutes? 37, she corrected gently. He let out a breath that was half disbelief, half admiration. "That's impressive." Then he added, "Ever consider leaving this dusty garage for something bigger?" Joe's smile froze. Riley looked at her father, uncertain. "Like what?" she asked cautiously. Bryce pulled out a business card. "I run an elite engine innovation team," he said. "We design future technologies, hybrids, adaptive engines, AI-tuned systems. We could use minds like yours. You'd have your own lab, mentorship, access to anything you want to build." Riley's heart raced. Joe stepped in. "She still has high school to finish." Bryce waved it off. "Online schooling. She'll finish early. I'll even sponsor her full ride through engineering school." Riley blinked. She looked at her oil-stained hands, then at the truck now humming like it was born on the track. "You do that for me?" Bryce smiled, this time without mocking. "You earned it." Joe pulled Riley aside. "It's your choice. Kid, I'll be proud no matter what." She stared at the truck again. Her mind flashed through memories of late nights learning, torque specs and decoding manuals under a flickering shop light. She never craved attention, only the thrill of solving a puzzle. "I want it," she whispered, "but only if I can come back and work here on weekends." Bryce raised an eyebrow when she said that, but agreed with a chuckle. "Deal." Riley shook his hand, her grip firm and unwavering. Her journey, long nurtured in silence, had suddenly roared into motion. Later that evening, the town buzzed with the story of Riley Riker, the mechanics, a daughter who fixed an impossible engine in under an hour. The diner waitress asked for her autograph. The high school boys who once laughed behind her back stared in awe. Joe, tired but glowing, cleaned up the shop and kept glancing at the spot where Riley had worked. That black truck, now gone, had changed their lives in ways no one could have predicted, not because of money or offers, but because it had finally shown the world what he'd always known. His daughter was extraordinary. The garage felt different now, like it had witnessed something sacred. Riley sat at her usual corner desk, scribbling down what she'd learned about airflow differentials and ECU delay mapping. Her notebook, worn and grease-stained, was suddenly worth more than any textbook. Joe brought her a soda and leaned against the workbench. "You nervous?" he asked. She shrugged. "Excited mostly. A little scared." "That's how you know it's real," he said. "You didn't just fix that engine, Riley. You made it better than it was ever designed to be." She looked at him. "You taught me everything." Bryce's jet returned the next day with 2 of his top engineers. They didn't question the offer. They came to learn. They watched her with respect, asked for her notes, and even requested a tour of the garage. Bryce filmed her working and posted it to the company's social media. It went viral overnight. 17-year-old girl fixes engine billionaires couldn't. Comments flooded in. Girls across the country called her a hero. Parents shared it proudly. By the end of the week, universities called Joe to ask if Riley would consider early placement. Doors flew open. Riley stayed grounded. Before she left for her first 3-month trial program in California, the town threw her a surprise send-off. Everyone from the local fire chief to her elementary school teachers showed up. Her favorite part was when Joe handed her a plaque carved from engine parts that read, "To Riley Riker, who never needed permission to be brilliant." She cried. He pretended he didn't. That night, under the stars, she sat on the hood of Joe's old Chevy and whispered, "I'm ready, not just for California, but for everything." Riley stood silent as the engine roared back to life, the sound echoing like a battle cry through the garage. Bryce Camden blinked twice, his voice caught somewhere between awe and disbelief. Around him, the small crowd of local mechanics and clients stood frozen, as if something sacred had just happened. Joe's face was a mixture of pride and restrained emotion, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Riley wiped her hands calmly and stepped away from the truck, as if bringing a dead engine back to life was the most natural thing in the world. Bryce moved forward slowly, studying her like a man trying to solve a riddle. "You just way past a custom diagnostic module," he said quietly. "Manually rerouted a triple-layered injection feedback system, and did it without factory schematics." Riley simply nodded, her arms crossed, her gaze focused. "It was flawed from the beginning," she replied. "The sensor design choked the fuel-air balance when pushed. Past 4,000 RPM, I just gave it breathing room." Bryce's mouth twitched. "You realize my top engineers missed that for 6 months?" Riley gave a faint shrug. "They weren't listening to the engine." Word of the event spread faster than wildfire. By the next morning, Riley's repair had gone viral. A bystander had live-streamed the entire scene, and overnight, the girl from the small garage became a symbol of talent overlooked. Bryce, to his credit, didn't backpedal. Instead, he returned to the garage the next day in a suit, this time not with arrogance but with intent. He stood before Riley and Joe with a contract folder, an offer, and something few executives ever showed: genuine respect. "I run a performance innovation lab in Los Angeles," he said. "It's elite, funded, and competitive as hell. I want her there. Full ride, housing, salary. She'll have access to technology even our race teams don't get. I've never offered this to someone without a degree, but honestly, I've never seen anyone like her." Joe looked at his daughter, his weathered hands folded tightly. Riley's lips parted slightly, but she was still. "And if I say no?" she asked. Bryce smiled. "Then I'll keep watching you from afar and regretting it." They didn't answer right away. Joe wanted to talk, not as her boss, but as her father. That night, they sat on the old metal bench behind the garage, a place they'd shared. Oil stains, bad jokes, and years of silent understanding. "I never pushed you into this," he said, "but I always knew you had more in you than this shop could give." Riley looked down at her hands, still, bearing smudges of engine grease. "I'm scared," she admitted, "not of failing, but of leaving this, us." Joe placed a hand on hers. "Then bring who you are with you." A week later, Riley arrived in Los Angeles. The facility Bryce had promised was real, sprawling and overwhelming. Glass walls overlooked massive testing bays, robotic arms danced alongside engineers, and simulations ran 24/7 on machines worth millions. Riley entered like an outsider, her hoodie stained with oil among designer lab coats and polished shoes. Some sneered. Some ignored her, but most watched, curious what the girl from the viral garage would actually do. Riley didn't talk much. She just asked for tools, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. Her first task was rebuilding a performance engine that had failed their virtual stress test. 3 engineering interns had already given up on it. Riley listened to the engine's last test recording through headphones, took notes, and mapped out her plan without fanfare. Within 2 days, the engine was running. Not only smoothly, but with a 4.2% torque gain. Bryce's top engineer, Dr. Moreno, walked past and muttered, "That wasn't luck." Riley didn't look up. Engines don't lie. People just stop listening. The next day, she had a permanent bay with her nameplate installed, R. Riker. Her rise wasn't without friction. One senior designer, Devin Rooks, constantly challenged her. "You're not even certified." He once sneered in front of a group. "No, degree, just garage guts." Riley didn't flinch. "Certification doesn't build engines. Precision does." Bryce overheard and later pulled Devin aside. "If she can do in 5 hours what your team couldn't in 5 weeks, maybe we need to certify reality, not resumes." After that, the tension eased. Slowly, others began to respect her, not for the fame, but for the consistency, the quiet brilliance she brought to every machine she touched. Months passed, and Riley began to design her own engine prototype, not just a rebuild, but something new. She envisioned a hybrid system optimized for raw torque delivery at low RPMs, designed specifically for heavy rescue vehicles in mountainous terrain. She tested relentlessly, iterated obsessively, and consulted no one until her first working model ran in the lab. When it did, it stunned the panel. Bryce organized a closed demo for investors and government. Liaison. Riley stood in front of them, nerves hidden behind a calm exterior, and presented her creation with clarity that silenced the room. After the demo, a senator from Colorado approached her. "You could save lives with this tech. Do you know that?" Riley nodded. "That's the point." Bryce stood beside her, proud. "She's not just building engines anymore. She's building purpose." A week later, the Department of Defense invited her to consult on military rescue vehicles. She wasn't even 20. Riley called Joe that night, her voice trembling. "Dad, they want me to speak to generals." Joe chuckled, tearing up. "Then speak, baby girl, because they're finally listening to the right voice." Despite her growing fame, Riley never became unreachable. She returned to her hometown every few months, not for ceremonies or cameras, but to fix engines with Joe, eat sandwiches on the same old bench, and remind herself of where it all began. One summer, she restored the garage's first lift with new hydraulics and donated a full diagnostic computer. The local kids who once watched her with confusion now asked for lessons. Riley always smiled and said, "Start with your ears. The engine tells you everything." Her story became a symbol of humility, talent, and resilience. On the one-year anniversary of her arrival in LA, the Innovation Lab held a surprise ceremony. In the courtyard stood a bronze statue, a little girl in overalls, holding a wrench, gazing upward at a rising engine schematic etched in steel. The plaque below read, "Riley Riker, she listened when others talked, she built when others doubted." Bryce gave a short speech. "We didn't just find talent in her. We were reminded what passion truly looks like." Riley stood quietly, her eyes glistening. She didn't need to speak. The engine of her journey spoke loud enough. Later that evening, she received a private message on her social feed from Devin Rooks. It was short. "I was wrong. You're the future of this place." She replied with a simple thumbs up and a wrench emoji. Life had changed, but Riley hadn't. Her path wasn't built on proving anyone wrong. It was built on proving herself right. She remembered every insult, every doubt, but carried them like tools in her back pocket. Lessons, not burdens. She didn't rise to rebel, she rose to repair, and in doing so, she rebuilt more than engines. She rebuilt what people believed was possible. The following spring, she was invited to speak at a nationwide STEM conference. On stage before thousands of young minds, she began not with accolades or numbers, but with a memory. "When I was dared to fix an impossible engine," she said, "I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. I just believed engines could be understood. So can people, so can problems, but only if you listen." The crowd gave her a standing ovation. Somewhere backstage, Joe wiped his eyes with a shop rag he kept in his coat pocket, like a talisman of where it all started. That summer, Riley and Joe co-authored a book, Wrenched Right, A Daughter, a Dad, and a Garage That Built Dreams. It topped non-fiction charts for months. Schools across the country began using excerpts to encourage young girls in STEM. Riley didn't want the spotlight, but she respected its power. She used it to uplift others, to show that greatness could wear overalls and smell like motor oil. And through it all, she never lost the voice that mattered most. Her father's, steady and proud, reminding her she was always more than enough. Even years later, when she led her own engine innovation firm, Riley kept one thing on her desk, a small wrench, slightly rusted, that Joe had handed her when she was 8. "This fixes more than bolts," he'd said. "It reminds you where your hands came from." Every time she held it, she remembered the garage, the dare, the engine that roared again, and the day the world finally heard her.